From MTN News, this is Montana This Morning.
Well, coming up, Montanans cope with 1 year of living amid the COVID-19 pandemic. This morning in a special series, we hear from a man at the forefront of the battle. Plus, how one member of Congress could be kicked out of the country. That's all coming up for us here. Well, good morning. What's that?
That's a crazy story.
I know, right?
That's an oops.
That's an oops. Any oopses in the, I mean, one thing that wasn't an oops, we haven't talked about it yet today, Chet, is that it was daylight savings this weekend.
Oh, yeah, no.
Daylight saving this weekend.
At
However,
any moment going to just drop because of that weird time change, trying to get
Really?
up, try to go to bed when you were supposed to go to bed, only it was not, yeah.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I made my head hurt, and my mother's head hurt too, trying to figure it out of how I could not lose any sleep, and I didn't. But
Right.
the daylight thing last night,
Yeah.
did get me because we were supposed to be asleep, you know, and
Yeah, I know.
was
Yeah.
waking up and going, why is the sun still awake? But
Well,
how about that forecast?
We'll take care of that. We'll keep the sun out of your eyes for most part because it's going to be a little cloudy today for the most part. So how about that? It'll be warm, but it'll be cloudy.
It'll be
It won't
weird
be
after
terrible.
this weekend.
It won't be too bad out there. As far as outside right now, temperatures in the mid to upper 20s. West Yellowstone a little on the cooler side, but today we're going to warm it up into the mid to upper 40s, but there's still a chance that we're going to keep a reminder that it's still winter around, at least for part of us. That detail's coming up from the Billion Auto Weather patio in about 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chet. Saturday marks the 1 year anniversary that Montanans have been living with the COVID-19 pandemic within our own state. And it started right here in Gallatin County. In a 3-part series, MTN's Cody Boyer sat down with the man who has been at the forefront of the Gallatin County battle against the virus to reflect on what he, as well as all of us, have gone through so far.
It's hard to believe for many of us, and for others, not as much. But this week, we've been living with the pandemic for an entire year. And we've been doing so as well here at the station. A lot of the hallways have been this quiet since the beginning, and that's been that case with businesses across the Gallatin Valley. But for those on the front lines, like the health department, COVID-19 has changed the game entirely.
People are stressed and people are afraid, and they should be stressed and they should be afraid.
This has slowed down many, many businesses.
Basically, every corner of campus has seen some sort of adaptation.
It's a complex and rapidly changing situation.
Yesterday was the real first day that it got hectic.
Hospitals are extremely stressed.
Maybe this is the great reset button so we can just start being nice to each other again.
You know, in New York City, they didn't have enough place to store bodies, and they were piling bodies in refrigerator trucks out on the street.
It's been a long year, one that doesn't seem to get shorter.
That's a game changer in public health. That changes everything.
On the evening of March 13th, 2020, the first COVID-19 case was announced in Montana. Not only the 13th, but Friday the 13th. And it was in Gallatin County. Almost 10 years since Health Officer Matt Kelly started with the Gallatin City County Health Department.
Nobody gets into public health to get rich. Nobody gets into public health to be famous. In fact, it's public health really, you know, when things are going well, we're anonymous.
But COVID-19, the coronavirus, whichever you call it, found a way. And now his is a face that now shows up on TV at least once a week.
I think like everybody, you're not quite sure what to make of that. We've had other viruses that have been significant, but nowhere near what this one became. We've had the MERS virus, the SARS virus.
More than 101,000 cases and waves of restrictions, from the mask mandate in July to enforcing closing times in September, October, November. Before that, I would meet with Kelly to talk about things like pertussis, bed bugs, the flu.
It was way bigger, and there was way more that we didn't have control of. What kind of virus causes you to lose your sense of smell and taste? And that's just weird.
Students stuck overseas, schools first closed, then through computer screens. All the while, public health officials and contact tracers raced against an invisible enemy.
We have been contact tracing for decades in public health, centuries in public health. It goes back, to medieval times. It was massive.
It makes me sad. We should be able to listen and talk to one another.
There's no scientific evidence!
Scenes like this ignited across the country. The Gallatin City County Board of Health, a public meeting to start requiring face coverings in the valley, and an auditorium filled with people. On the Kelly, it was a morning that caused a shift.
One of the hardest times in a church parking lot, I had somebody screaming in my face that they thought I should burn in hell. And, calling me a fascist communist that should burn in hell. And I'm standing in a church parking lot, just coming out of a meeting that had been sort of occupied and disrupted by people who were upset about having to wear face coverings. And that was pretty disturbing.
In Gallatin County since the beginning, Cody Boyer, MTN News.
Well, Cody reports that's just scraping the surface. You can watch part 2 tomorrow morning, exploring more of the hardships and also the positives that people found during this last year. Well, 6:36 for you now. You probably thought the 2020 election was over. Well, think again. It's possible a current member of Congress could be kicked out in the coming days, not for inappropriate behavior or for breaking any rules, but for not actually winning their election. Our Joe St. George has a closer look at what's going on and whether Congress swore in the wrong person.
Congress has been busy this year.
The bill as amended is passed.
They just passed a stimulus package, they endured an insurrection, and voted on impeachment.
But is there someone actively voting as a member of Congress who shouldn't be there? Well, the answer depends on who you ask. The controversy is all about the 2nd Congressional District in Iowa, represented by Republican Congresswoman Marinette Miller-Meeks. She defeated in November, according to Iowa state officials, Democrat Rita Hart by, get this, just 6 votes, one of the closest elections in American history. But Hart is saying she actually won the election and the 22 ballots were not counted that should have been.
Each House of Congress shall be the judge of its own elections.
As a result, the House Committee on Administration has started investigating whether they swore in the wrong member of Congress. Republicans are furious.
We're having a meeting to move forward with overturning an election of one of our colleagues.
But so far, the committee hasn't dismissed calls to drop the challenge, and investigation continues.
These allegations warrant further investigation by the committee.
As far as how this impacts you, well, changing one seat would not impact the balance of power in Congress, but it could set a precedent for Congress being more involved in who gets sworn in close races. Speaker Pelosi said last week there is a scenario where the current congressman gets kicked out.
There could be a scenario to that extent.
On Capitol Hill, I'm Joe St. George.
6:38 now. Today's awaiting child lives up to one of the words he describes himself as, and that word is brave. MTN's Lauren Heiser introduces us to Hunter.
Hi, my name is Hunter. I'm 14.
Hunter is a friendly, energetic kid who loves to skateboard and make new friends. Over the years, Erica Wilcox, a child protection specialist with the intensive care unit, says she's really enjoyed getting to know him. We asked Hunter, what are the top 3 things that someone should know about you?
If you had to list them all 3 in a row, what would they be?
Brave.
Yeah?
I'm special. And I'm loved.
I think it's important for people to know that Hunter has been through a lot in his young life, but that he still has a really big heart, and he loves fiercely. He's very loyal to the people that he loves, and he wants to do well, even though sometimes that's hard for him. I think he would do best in a 2-parent home. He has a lot of energy, so that could be challenging for a single person to navigate that. And I think he would do really well having the influence of older siblings.
Hunter does keep in contact with his other siblings, as well as his previous foster parents.
You know, everybody that has really been in Hunter's life in a more involved and intimate way, they stick around because he is such a great kid.
In Missoula, Lauren Heiser, MTN News.
Well, coming up here, an alarm is being raised about antibiotic resistance and COVID-19. Coming up, find out why the connection is not as direct as you might think, but is still a real issue. But first, here's a look at what's coming up at 7 on CBS This Morning.
Good morning. Ahead on CBS This Morning, the financial pain continues 1 full year after COVID-19 shut down large portions of the American economy. We revisit a small business to see how the owner and laid-off employees are still dealing with the problem. Also, highlights from the Grammys, including a historic night for Beyonce, plus only on CBS This Morning, how one Grammy winner is committing some of his royalties to racial justice organizations and why he's calling on the music industry to follow suit. And Gail talks with comedy icon Eddie Murphy why he took so long to make the sequel to Coming to America and his decision to step back from making movies for a while. We're glad the prince has returned. We'll see you at 7.